Hello, and welcome to the Unplug Meditation Podcast. I am so excited because we have a huge star on with us today. Her name is Hala Khouri, and she is going to be talking about her new book, Peace, flash the title, from Anxiety. Peace from Anxiety. Get grounded, build resilience, and connect amidst the chaos. Who doesn't want that? I don't think I've ever met a human being on the planet who doesn't want peace from anxiety. Hala, welcome. Thank you for coming on the Unplugged podcast. And would love to hear about this book. How do we find peace from anxiety?
Oh boy. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here and so fun to be talking to a local group that's just in my community. How do we find peace from anxiety? You know, I started writing this book before COVID hit. And then once COVID hit, my editors were like, hurry up, hurry up. We need this book. This book was really a culmination of my work for the past 2 decades. It felt like I've been helping and supporting folks that were dealing with trauma. I'm a trauma therapist, a clinician, a yoga teacher. I've spent the last couple of decades in private practice and in workshops and in classes, sharing these tools with people. And a lot of the tools come from my training in somatic experiencing, which is a body-based therapy that addresses trauma and dysregulation in the nervous system. And so this book really came answering a call from students and clients saying, please make your work more accessible. And so it was really a pleasure to write. You know, oftentimes people are like, you wrote a book, it's so hard. And I'm like, no, because it's like every smart thing I've ever said is now in one book, and now I'm done. I got nothing else to say. But it felt like, you know, there's a lot of complicated reasons we're anxious. And just like I feel like meditation is, there's also a simplicity towards cultivating the tools to allow us to not run away from that so that we can be with it and not be overwhelmed, or we can move through it. And so I'm really passionate about sharing these embodied tools to help us befriend our nervous systems and feel like we're in some sort of a healthy kind of control of our internal experience. And that's really the part about the book that's about the personal, is really about that.
And what are some of the tools? Like a quick tool maybe that you can share that's from the book that can help us find peace when we're feeling anxious.
Absolutely. So I'll share a couple because it's not one size fits all, right? And so we don't always know what's going to work for us. But one thing I'll invite folks to do who are listening right now is I want you to look around the space that you're in and just notice the colors and the textures you see, not what you want to tidy up. And actually move your head when you do this. And notice what happens in your body. So usually about 50% of people will take a spontaneous deep breath. I don't know if you had that experience, but just a spontaneous deep breath and a settling. Some people won't do anything. Some people, it'll get them activated. But one tool is orienting to your environment. You can orient with your eyes, you can orient with your ears. Sometimes when we're anxious, most of the time when we're anxious, we're thinking about the future or the past. We're not actually present. And so getting our senses into present time can be one way to just have a little settling. And my favorite tool is grounding, is trying to find a sense of ground. Again, when we're anxious, we're going to feel floaty, ungrounded, like there's nothing holding us down on this earth. And so grounding can be as simple as feeling the parts of your body touching the floor or the chair right now, right? So you might even wiggle and find your sit bones or plant your feet on the floor. Just training our brain to look for where there is support can be settling. Like I just saw you take a breath. I saw your shoulders settle, right? So look for that right now. See if you can find any sense of being connected to the earth. And what we're looking for is an involuntary, like a spontaneous breath or settling. And it doesn't mean that our anxiety suddenly goes away. It just means that we learn to look for something else. And we're not just hypervigilant for the cues of anxiety. And that can start to disrupt, there's this saying, things that fire together, wire together in terms of our brain, right? And we can change what's firing together so that we can be with our anxiety and be grounded and maybe not be overwhelmed by it.
I love that you just had us get present by looking through the visual at our environment and then feeling sensationally the ground beneath us on our feet and maybe our rear ends, wherever we're sitting. That is such an easy tool to use. And I agree with books are such a precious commodity that people don't understand. You spend your life taking all the wisdom that you have, and you have so much wisdom because I've been following you for a very long time. I've been trying to get you to teach at Unplug since 2014. I don't know if you remember when I reached out to you.
I want to bring my kids to Unplug too, so we'll talk.
Okay. And I have to say, like, these are just talking to you gets me immediately into my body. And the fact that we can now pick up this book and get all your wisdom in such a succinct way is brilliant. And it just came out, which is so cool. So everybody needs to race out and buy this book. Flash the cover one more time, because this is actually on YouTube. We show this Peace from Anxiety. Who doesn't want that? And everybody on the Unplug app is going to be seeing this too, because we'll put on the app.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
I love these conversations so much, because one of the things that I ask is, why? Why are you doing what you do? Where did you come from? Where are you, like, how did you get into this business of yoga and healing and trauma? Who are you and where do you come from and why are you doing this?
Well, I always say I come to this work by way of Beirut, Lebanon, which is where I'm from. And, my roots are in a region filled with trauma. I mean, we see it right now. It's so present, all the trauma in that region. And so even though I grew up here in the United States, I think there's a part of me, ever since I was little, that wants people to be okay so they stop fighting with each other. Like, it's really that simple. Which is also why this book is not about just personal well-being. Like, we can't be well until everybody is well. If there was anything COVID-19 taught us, is that until everybody's okay, nobody's going to ever be okay. So, I think that my roots coming from a region riddled with so much trauma, and then dealing with trauma and addiction in my own family and nobody ever talking about it. Like, I decided I was just going to become an expert in all the things I didn't understand so that I could figure out how to feel safe and get my needs met. So, and then, having my nonprofit Off the Mat into the world, where we're doing a lot of leadership training and activism, and seeing that activism and mental health go hand in hand. Social justice and well-being are essentially the same thing, because what is justice about? It's about everybody having the capacity to be well and thrive. So my whole path has been about linking personal, interpersonal, and systemic trauma and resilience together. And, this book was really important because very often books, pretty like self-helpy books like this are all about individual well-being. This book is not that. It looks like that. But essentially, I like to say that this book is a journey from individual well-being to collective care. And until we are looking at the ways that we are implicated in causing other people anxiety, we won't be able to be well, because it requires us to cut off our own humanity to be complicit in the suffering of others. And so, being in mental health for so long, I realized, like, if mental health isn't addressing injustice, we're part of the problem. We're allowing people of privilege to just breathe and meditate their way out of their complicity. We are blaming people who've been disadvantaged for their suffering. And so, really at the end of this, the last chapter, the second to last chapter, is called A Global Heart. And this is about how do we be global citizens and let the whole world into our hearts. And so that feels kind of like my journey. My family, my husband, I'm Arab, my husband is Black and Jewish, like my kids are the world, right? And how do we find ways to be together even when it's messy, even when we're in our trauma, and so we can heal together? And that's really what this book is about.
Talk about the global citizen. what exactly does that mean to you? And how do you see the world changing? I mean, obviously, this last year, we've all changed so much. Like, just everyone has kind of found what makes them happy. They've found like where they want to put more attention, where they want to like recede a little bit, and how we can collectively care about others. I'm
Yeah.
curious about your take on that.
Yeah. So I think that so a few things. First thing that started to happen prior to the internet is globalization, right? Global economies, corporations not having borders, the way that our behavior in one country implicates people in other countries, right? So on an economic, even political level, we've become more globalized, right? Borders are still firm, but economically, our behavior has global implications, right? We're no longer buying food from our local farmer or buying clothing from the person even within our same state, right? Our existence has global implications, right? And then with the internet and social media, we have access to people all over the globe. We can see, uprisings happening on the other side of the planet. We can, there is a way that we can now connect outside of borders that is brand new. So there's both an awareness on some level of what's happening globally and a responsibility. And I think that's overwhelming to a lot of people. I don't know about you, but it's overwhelming to me. Like I can barely keep my house straight, much less think about the implications of where I'm banking and where my clothes are from and how people on the other side of the planet are being treated, right? I think a lot of people can get overwhelmed by that. And so thinking globally asks us, to have an analysis of what's happening in the world. And I don't claim to have the right analysis or understand it all, but understand the implications of this global economy. And even, I don't know that the word global culture is correct, but there's a way that culture is becoming shared across borders. And think about our participation in the world beyond just our little in-group, And I think this is something that's never been done before. Our ancestors lived in tribe, they lived in groups, they lived in cultures that were similar with people who were similar. Maybe you knew about the people on the other side of the mountain, but you didn't know about the whole world. And what's beautiful about understanding or having access to this broader paradigm is greater awareness and greater accountability for our actions. So, I write in the book that I feel like we're being called to love bigger than we have ever before. And that this is an opportunity to let our hearts crack wide open in a celebratory way, not in a way that's overwhelming.
How do we love bigger? I love this.
I mean, I think it requires us to do some really messy work about the biases and the assumptions that we've internalized, about the ways we might carry privileges we're not aware of, or the ways that we've internalized messaging of oppression and disadvantage. So there is a level of critical self-awareness. And so I use the word critical to point to the work of critical theologists and critical psychologists who basically say, we have to be aware of the larger socio-political context that we're in. I can't just know myself in terms of myself and my family, my immediate family. I have to think about what it's like to be, an upper middle class, light-skinned, able-bodied, cisgender female growing up in the United States. What advantages do I have because of that? What disadvantages do I have? And how has my perception of the world been shaped by that? And especially around privilege, I often, say to folks, it's the whole thing about right-handed people. If you're right-handed, how often do you think about doorknobs or scissors or car doors? Probably never, right? So when the world is oriented towards you, you don't realize it. But when the world is not oriented towards your care or your protection, you're very aware of it.
Wow.
So that awareness, that critical awareness, is vital to our well-being. Otherwise, our yoga, our meditation, our therapy just becomes a way to dissociate and disconnect.
I never even thought about that. Obviously, I'm right-handed, but I never thought about the left-handed person. So that just shows you kind of where we are. I remember early days, I had a conversation with someone who was Black, and she said, "What does it feel like to be white and privileged?" And I said to her, "Honestly, I never even think about it." And she's like, "What do you mean you never think about it?" And I said, it doesn't even cross my mind. And she said, "Because I think about being Black every single morning. I have to put on a fake voice. Sometimes when I go to the office, I have to do this, I have to do that." And it really blew my mind when she told me that story.
Yeah.
And I think about her a lot. Like, I've been thinking about her a lot during these days. But there I go again, listening to you, Hala, telling me that I never even once thought about the left-handed person. And it just makes me realize, like, these are just things that when the world is working in your favor,
Yeah, you don't have to think about it.
have the awareness around it. And it is an eye-opening experience. I think this whole pandemic and this whole time has made us all so uncomfortable. And that's forced us to open up our eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Okay. So you started teaching yoga, like, you were born in the US.
I was born in Beirut.
You were born in Beirut.
Lebanon,
How
yeah.
old were you when you moved here?
I was 3 when we moved here. So I grew up in Miami, Florida, actually.
Oh, right. And then are you in LA or in New York right now?
LA.
LA. And when did you move to Los Angeles?
I moved to LA in 2000.
Oh, how did you
From
go
New York.
Miami?
I went to Miami, then I went to New York for college. I stayed in New York a little bit longer, and then I came to LA.
And when you came to LA, did you decide you were going to go into the health and wellness business, or did you do something different and then something brought you to this world?
I found yoga when I was in New York. To make money during college, I was a fitness instructor and a personal trainer. Wow. And so I was in the gym all the time. And, and it was really interesting because I was studying psychology and feeling like I was learning nothing about people in these psychology classes. They were so pathologizing, they were so dehumanizing. But then I was like working with clients one-on-one at the gym, and they would open up and talk to me, and then I would stretch them out, and then we'd work out emotions, which, like, what I didn't realize was happening was I was getting an education in the mind-body connection. Mm-hmm. I'd never heard of what that was, but something was happening with my clients where like psychology was happening there in the gym, not in like the Ivy League classroom. Mm-hmm. And then I saw a yoga class out of the corner of my eye at one of the gyms, and I decided to try it. And I hated it. It was like intolerable. It was too slow. And, I was like binging on sugar and getting on the treadmill for an hour a day. Like, I could not tolerate actually being in my body. But I was like, whatever that is, I have to figure out how to do that. I didn't have a word for it. It was one of those yoga classes, the teacher was like in baggy pants, and it was very slow and meditative, and it made my skin crawl. But I knew I needed to find my way back to yoga, but I knew I couldn't then. So then I found like sweaty power yoga with loud music. And that was like my doorway in. It was all I could tolerate. Was, okay, like blast the music, have me be sweating, and then maybe I can just feel my body for a second. Mm-hmm. So, I started practicing in New York that way. And when I moved to LA, I immediately moved here and did my yoga teacher training in 2000.
Where did you do that, and who was the teacher?
Oh, I was with Mati Ezrati and Lisa Walford at Yoga Works.
Okay.
And so I trained with them right away, and started teaching yoga as soon as I left my teacher training. So I've been teaching for 20 years now. But yoga to me was more the psychology I was looking for. It was more my way to connect with people and have them connect with themselves. Mm-hmm. And so then I did that, and then I got my counseling degree and started doing my private practice, my therapy practice. But that was my pathway. I've always known, since 8th grade, I wanted to be a therapist, so I've been studying psychology and healing and all those things since 8th grade.
So what are you doing now? Like, are you still teaching yoga? Or are you just doing it privately, one-on-one with clients? Do you ever teach group classes? Are you teaching meditation? How are you doing that? I want to learn all about it.
I don't teach private yoga. I stopped doing that once I opened my clinical practice in 2014. So I've been working with people one-on-one doing mostly somatic experiencing, which is a body-based psychotherapy that addresses trauma and anxiety and anything that's going on in the body. So just I've been a therapist, a clinician.
Mhm.
I teach 2 public yoga classes a week. But I'm not really doing my private practice anymore because I've gone back to school to do a PhD in community psychology with an emphasis on basically social justice and eco-psychology. So I've completed a second master's degree in community psychology because a lot of my work now is I'm trying to figure out how to work organizationally and do culture change work. So I go into nonprofits, mental health institutions, and train the entire staff to be trauma informed, to build cultures of mindfulness and awareness together. So a lot of my work has been broadening to work with groups and doing more kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion work and helping people address the way that, bias and racism and all the isms show up in their work. So I'm not doing as much one-on-one, but broadly. And so right now I took a break from school to write the book. And now I'm back, going to begin the dissertation process. And I think my dissertation is going to be on embodied social justice pedagogy. So how do we bring this all together to create cultures that are oriented towards justice?
And what do you love to do when you're not doing this? Like, what's kind of a guilty fun thing that you do? Like for me, I'm a big water skier. It's my favorite thing on the planet.
Oh my God, I love it.
If I could just water ski all day long, I would be doing that.
Wow.
What about you?
Oh, I'm terrible at answering this question. It's like really my biggest work right now is to figure out how to have fun. I mean, I have 2 kids, they're 10 and 13. Like my guiltiest pleasure is watching Netflix these days, So, I mean, I love my work, which is a little deceiving because then I work all the time. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I need to do something that's not work.
Right.
I love to dance. That's my medicine. So, now that I'm vaccinated and things are safer, I'll probably go back to my dance classes. I had some friends over Saturday and we danced a bunch. So, I'd say dancing is my medicine, is my jam, but I'm not super good. Like this is my next edge is like, just do something that's not like, that's just totally for fun. So I'm working on that.
That's good. I actually mastered that over this pandemic. I decided to focus my attention because I naturally want to work all the time too, to do something a little bit more like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's next on the agenda for you?
I mean, the next thing is, so the other thing that happened during COVID was and this was planned before COVID hit, I launched an online membership community, and that's been really beautiful. We do practices together every month, meditations, and there's a different theme. And then we get together on live calls and we discuss the theme. And so there's this beautiful online community that's forming. So that's, that is going to be something I continue doing. And, really the focus is the online community, and the dissertation is like the next 3 years is going to be about figuring out how to uplift the amazing embodied social justice work that's happening and write a meaningful dissertation that'll allow me to hopefully go in and support entire organizations in doing culture change work, to have people become aware, develop that critical consciousness, and try to build cultures that challenge the status quo, which I think is exciting because we can do them within organizations and hopefully figure out how to translate it, into our larger culture.
I always say you just touch one soul and they'll ripple it out to thousands. It's pretty amazing. I see it all the time.
Yeah.
People always say, you started this thing and look at what you did. I'm like, yeah, I do it, but like you do it. And now you're sharing it with more people than I ever even shared it with. So the ripple is phenomenal. So I think what seeds you're planting will have just an endless ripple. And also with this, that's so great. So is there anything else that you feel like people should know about you that they don't?
I don't think so. You asked me a lot of really good questions about myself. So.
Like how I'm like diving in deeper.
Yeah.
Amazing. Have you been to Unplug meditation?
I have walked by it and like looked inside, and I've looked at your website because a while back I saw you're doing programming for young people. And I feel like that's when we spoke. But I don't think I've ever officially been through the doors.
You need to
I
come.
need to come.
Speak on the big stage.
I'd love it. I'd love it, for real.
So I know you are friends with like, who are some of your big yogi friends? I always see you.
Sean Korn and I started our nonprofit together. I'm friends with Shiva Ray and Micheline Berry. These are the local teachers. Yeah.
What about Alan Finger? Do you remember him?
I remember him. I've never studied with him, so I don't know him.
Okay. He's great. He's been at Unplugged a couple times.
Oh, cool.
And what about Deepak? Have you ever done stuff with him? Okay. Yeah. He's also taught at Unplugged once.
And are you doing stuff online too, or are you back in person?
We're live streaming every single day. And we are going back to in person June 15th because LA is opening up. So we're going to open up with it. But our members are like, please do not stop live streaming. And we now have members in, London and in Spain. And we said we're going to keep going. So it's going to be very interesting. Like, our next big thing is going to be mastering the hybrid model.
Totally.
How do we know how to do that? We don't. We're going to just like learn as we go. That's how we roll here. But really excited about that. So can you flash your book one more time?
Yes, for sure.
If there's anything that people need to know about peace from anxiety, what do you think the most important takeaway is from this book?
I think the most important takeaway, I think people will have lots of different takeaways, but I think that this book is not about, it doesn't send a message that you have to be okay on your own. That we need support. We need to ask for support. We need to be in community. We need to feel a sense of purpose. So this is not one of those books that's going to make you feel pressured. Like that if I figure out a few things, then I have to figure out how to be happy alone. This book really pushes against individualism, extraction, capitalism, all that stuff. So I'm hoping that it offers people a little bit of a fresh perspective on what well-being is.
Love that. Thank you so much for being on the Unplugged podcast. I'm so excited to share you with everyone, Hala. And
such a pleasure to be here.
What social media accounts or where can we find you?
You can find me at Hala Yoga, both on Instagram, I guess Twitter. I don't really tweet. And on Facebook, my name, Hala Khouri. And my website has everything I do, all my trainings and workshops and all that. The book information is on there. It's just my name, halakhouri.com.